Bentley here, good evening to you. On behalf of the Calgary Climate Hub, I welcome you to A Climate of Change, the Hub's live cast exploring with thought leaders from across North America what these wildly unprecedented times mean for addressing the climate crisis here in Alberta and how to create the fast, fair, and impactful change we need. In the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge that we live, work, and play on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Tsuut'ina, the Axis Nakota Nations, the Métis Nations of Region 3, and all people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of southern Alberta. To follow up the land acknowledgement, I'll just say that any global shift that does not include a just transition for the world's BIPOC, youth, economically disadvantaged, as well as communities from transitioning industries, sets itself up for failure. This effort requires buy-in from everybody, which means historically underrepresented voices need a seat at the table now more than ever. I also want to thank very quickly our brand new sponsors for tonight's show, Skyfire Energy. They've sponsored us in the past before, and so has Go Electric, but we're also bringing on Radicle Balance and Solar Homes Incorporated, and I'll talk about them a little later on in the show. So on we go. Since COP26, increasingly the role of climate-concerned citizens worldwide is to hold governments to their promises while pushing for more and better policies that will actually get the job done. Asking municipalities for the real climate data tells electeds that we're keeping an eye on what matters and reminds them of our expectations of them. Indeed, measuring what matters has never been more important, which is why we're very happy to have as our guest tonight, Margot Pollet from our partner organization, Climate Reality Project Canada. The CRPC does the critical work of fostering countrywide connection and engagement between the climate hubs, honed in on local climate action, and have been solid allies with the Calgary Climate Hub since our very earliest days. We'll be speaking tonight about the 2021 results from the standings of the CRPC's National Climate League, of which our guest is the lead commissioner, and which I describe as a gamified approach for encouraging hundreds of your fellow Canadians to encourage their local municipal leaders and collect the critical local level data that Canada requires to successfully transition to a climate-friendly future. Celebrate what we're getting right and identify what needs work. Margot Pollet, welcome to A Climate of Change.
Thank you so much, Steve. Good night. Good to be with you tonight. I'm very happy.
Excellent. Do you feel like I gave the good description to the National Climate League there?
I think you did. I think it was a very good pitch.
Okay, excellent. Well, we're going to start off, and Margot's just going to give us a little bit of a run through about these findings. So these are standings, and each year there's a new release that comes out, and Margot has really quarterbacked this huge initiative to get this into our hands. And so, Margot, take it away.
Thank you, Steve. Bear with me while I share my screen for a second, but I like the sports expression, the quarterback. I think that's a good one.
Yeah, right? Well, quarterback requires a team, but it needs leadership, right?
The theme of the National Climate League now is superheroes, but it used to be sports, so it's a good parallel that you do.
You see, there you go.
Perfect. So do you still see my screen? Is it all good?
Yep, I see your screen.
Okay, perfect. So I'm here to talk about the National Climate League. As Steve has said, I'm the lead commissioner of the National Climate League, and we just published our results. So what I'll be doing today is doing a little bit of a broader summary of what the National Climate League is, what our process has been, because it's a yearly project that takes on a little bit more than 10 months. And I will be also covering some of the key results that we've identified, trying to highlight Calgary. Obviously, I want to disclose that I'm no expert to Calgary itself, but I'll try to basically say a little bit about that context for our audience tonight. So what is the National Climate League? The National Climate League has been started in 2018. We call it an exercise in participative democracy, highlighting local solutions that help improve the lives of everyday Canadians and set Canadian municipalities on a path to carbon neutrality by 2050. Basically, to quantify the impacts and measure what matters, we track progress on primary and complementary indicators across Canadian municipalities. And I will be going more in depth about those primary and complementary indicators a little later. We chose those indicators based on 5 criteria, being accessibility, comparability across cities, the ability of the municipal government to act on these different indicators, their impact on greenhouse gases emission, and whether or not the average citizen cares about that particular indicator improving. The reason for this is that we could have hundreds of indicators, but we had to choose, and we have 31 right now, as of now. So the process of the National Climate League, it starts in 2021 in spring. What we do is we do indicator refinement, and we establish the league, meaning we have volunteers join us. All the process of the Climate League is done by volunteers, meaning the data collection, as well as the writing and putting it together. In summer, we do data collection and research. So that means that we have volunteers reaching out to their municipalities, looking online for data. We obviously provide some training on how to find the data, where to find it, talking points as well with municipal, for example, councillors, for citizens to feel comfortable doing that in their role. In fall, we do the data consolidation, finding data gaps. In winter, we obviously start the writing of it, again, by volunteers, as I've said, translation, because our National Climate League is available in both French and English. And we do graphic design and visualization of the different data. Right now, we just passed the official launch on March 17th, and that's why I'm really happy to be sharing the results with everyone. So a few highlights on the 2021 standings. We're really happy to have a total of 66 municipalities of all sizes. The smaller municipality is Thames Centre with about 10,000 residents. And then we have municipalities of all kinds of sizes, all the way to the Montreal, Vancouver, and Toronto, which are the biggest one of Canada. We have a total of 551 data points that were collected, and above 50 volunteers that participated with us this year. And once again, I want to express my personal thank you to all of them, because they've done an incredible work on this project. What to expect in the National Climate League? We have a few sections that are really interesting to point out. The first one being a climate year in review. So what we thought was interesting with that section is we looked at Environment Canada resume for summary for the weather of 2021. And I quote, they wrote, "Not in 26 years has there been anything comparable to this year, where Canadian endured such a stream of weather events. At times in 2021, Canada even broke records for the number of records broken." It's important when we talk about climate change, we hear about some things that happen globally, but it's important to put it back in the context of this is what's happening in our own backyards. Obviously, we've heard about events, but we really wanted to bring the context of why the NCL is important. Then we have section on international highlights. So for all of the indicators, what we do is we look what other municipalities worldwide are doing and highlight some of the policies that, for example, Canadian municipalities could inspire themselves. So kind of looking at leaders in such ways. We also have a new feature on data accessibility and availability. It was very important to us to be transparent on how and where we're getting that data, as well as the limitations, because we often say in the context of the NCL that not finding data is information in itself. The fact that we're not able to have access to it is basically what we're trying to solve, because we believe that in order to act, we need to be able to measure, we need people to be informed. Therefore, no data is still valid information. And then finally, we have a new justice theme. The NCL is obviously, as I said, about climate, but it's not only about greenhouse gases emissions or quality of life. We wanted to bring a climate justice lens to this year's project. We wanted to stress in this edition really how we aspire to have communities where no one is left behind. That's very important. Then for the summary of this map, so that's the winner's summary for this year. And that actually gives me a great opportunity to dig a little deeper and list the different indicators that we have. So we have affordable housing, air quality, bike lanes, climate mitigation, energy mix, EV charging stations, gender equity, landfill waste, the number of municipal employees dedicated to the transition, public transit, shared vehicle, sustainable building, sustainable jobs, urban agriculture, urban greenness, and walkability. For the talk today, I won't be able to get in detail with all of them, but I really invite you to look at the report to know more about the methodology, as well as the results for each of the municipalities that are in the NCL. We also cover a number of complementary indicators, and those tend to be more binary of, for example, does a city has public participation, or does a city take has a carbon budget that is already established? There's one on divestment that's very interesting, on indicating whether a municipality has put forward a plan to divest and put their funds away from fossil fuel. And that enables you to have a quick look at, I don't know if this slide's big enough on your screen, but we do have the information for Calgary. And so we can see that in 4 of those secondary indicators, Calgary has said yes, so they have put in place some programs. In 3 of them, there are currently in progress being made, and 2 of them have not and do not have any policy toward those indicators. And so there's things that can be passed on as policy at the municipal level. So it's really by advocacy and really having citizens involved and having change made at the municipal level. So now I'll present the key takeaways from the report. As I said, I'm going to try to focus a little bit on the data of Calgary for our audience, but I do not place myself at all as an expert in that context. So the 2 general highlights that we have identified for the National Climate Year this year is an increase in the representation of historically marginalized groups, such as BIPOC, women, and non-binary candidates during the recent elections that happened in 2021. At the municipal level, it was Alberta, Quebec, Newfoundland, and Labrador, and Yukon. Put a few articles. We think that this is very much going in the right direction and is important to highlight. As the second one is that Canadians are increasingly worrying about climate change and its effect. We put results from a survey that came out last year. The survey was done over the summer, and we have 52% of respondents that reported being extremely or quite concerned about climate change, with British Columbians being the most concerned at 55%. And putting back into the context of last summer, it was during the terrible fires that happened, and that could definitely be a moment of an influence at that specific moment in time. Hope everybody is following along great. Now I'm going to get into more of the results aspects, starting with bike lanes. So we had the winner being Kelowna this year. Calgary scores at 93 kilometers per 100,000 inhabitants. And in the visuals, what we've done is compare them in size of municipalities. So for example, the very large municipalities are the one that are with more than 600,000. And technically Calgary is 4th in that category. For public transit, there has been a huge difference comparing to the other years, obviously because of the pandemic. So we like to compare data over time to see how it changes. Does it improve? Does it do less good? In that context, there are external factors, including the pandemic, the fact that people were asked to stay at home more. There has been maybe resistance of people using public transportation. So we don't get too much into the reasons for that, but we are able to, with data, see it. For Calgary specifically, in 2020, there was 84 trips per resident per year that were done. It's an average, obviously. And in Calgary 2021, it was 38. So that's a decrease of 54%. In other municipalities such as Montreal and Toronto, it almost reached 72%. For landfill waste, once again, in the context of comparing 2020 and 2021 edition, once again, the pandemic has happened. We've heard about reasons such as, for example, people being more at home, ordering more takeout is a business possibility, or doing more online shopping is another one. So what's interesting is to see how much it's changed, and Calgary has increased a lot. And when it comes to that, that kind of portrays a problem, but really now looking at the data, what are some of the solutions that can be implemented, that municipalities can look in their own context, what do they need? And for example, in landfill waste, that goes through diversion, whether it's developing better or more composting program, reducing the barrier for compost, doing more education, or is it recycling that's more important? Our winning city, actually Burnaby, we highlighted one of their policy in 2021. They were able to put together a big program to recycle mattresses. And that represents like 1,000 kilograms every year that it can be reused in more of like a circular manner, because we know that losing resources and having more waste is not what we are working toward, or that's not what we want for our communities to be healthy and sustainable. Following with the urban greenness indicator, our winner was, not surprisingly, St. John's. As smaller municipalities tended to do better in that indicator. There's actually a report, all the data comes from a report from Statistics Canada that came out last year, where they looked at data over a span of 20 years. So 20 all the way to 2019. And one of the conclusions of the report was that 3/4 of large and medium-sized cities were less green in 2019 than they had been 20 years earlier. And it's interesting to see, and I highlighted it in this presentation, because Calgary was at the very bottom of that list, with only 42% of the municipality that was considered as urban greenness. And when it comes to urban greenness in the context of climate change in Canada, it's very helpful for multiple of things, obviously mental health and quality of life, but things that are particularly pertained to climate change, for example, the island heat effect. Where I live in Chotake, Montreal, there are sometimes in the summer differences of 1 or 2 degrees depending on where you are in the city. And actually having more urban greenness is what helps with fighting that urban heat effect. We also have been talking a lot about floods, and in the context of Calgary as well. Having more urban greenness helps to manage, do flood management. And actually one of the founding of the last IPCC report that came out, if you look at the North America results, it's very likely that we are going to have harder and more intense raining events. So municipalities have to manage and to prepare for such consequences. And finally, the last element that I wanted to share was about municipal employees. Calgary scored at just 9, with our winner being Vancouver at almost 25 employees. That indicator is especially for you to know as citizens, oh, well, what are the kind of things that my municipality is working toward? Where are the resources put? Is there anything that is happening? Because those people are the people that are advocating and thinking about the future and really acting on the ground. So it's a new indicator that we have included in this year's NCL. One more time, a huge thank you to all of our volunteers for that project. I'm really excited to get talking with you, Steve, now that I've finished my little presentation, and talk about where do we go from here. I just have a few points that the NCL is a source of valuable knowledge. It's a tool for also building connection and relationship. We encourage everyone to share this document with the media, with your local elected officials, with everyone that is interested, and I think all should be, for the generation of the present and also the generation of the future. It's a tool for action and for better policy.
Excellent. Well, that's the fruition of a lot of work that had to be done by Climate Reality Canada, and certainly by you. I guess in the interest of full disclosure, I should mention that I work as a regional organizer for Alberta for the Climate Reality Canada. And from time to time, I had Margot pushing me to answer emails that I had been neglecting, and push it and try to get the results in for these for these standings. I can tell you that I didn't do the actual work of acquiring that data, but other hub volunteers took the lead on that, and we were able to submit to that. So yeah, so I feel like, I feel like when I look at this report, that this is a whole lot of work and a whole lot of data that came together to explain how every city that is participating, and really the cities that are participating are participating because somebody on the ground is willing to go in and acquire that data from that city. But the number of cities that are participating is growing, which is great. But I'm interested, Margot. You've broken down what's in the report. I'm interested in sort of your journey here on this, because it's a very interesting thing that you're doing. You're reaching out to people that care about climate across the country, and I've been on phone calls or Zoom calls with other regional organizers and other climate folks as part of this initiative and other climate reality stuff. What can you tell us about what that year was like for you pulling all this together?
What that year has been like? Oh,
Yeah.
it's been amazing.
Mhm.
I really can't stress, and I do stress it a lot. Thank you to all our volunteers. It's a huge collaborative work. There's a lot of work that comes in it, but it doesn't need to be, as in everyone kind of puts in what they're capable of. So we have some volunteers that are really close to their municipality and actually worked with municipal employees to get the data and verify the data. And then that leads to terrific relationship building, where we had actually during our launch, I'll give a shout out to our Oakville Climate Hub that was involved with a municipal official and is involved on the ground to what they are interested in is urban sprawl and how to diminish it, because urban sprawl is not how we build healthy communities. It leads to more usage of cars, etc. And so having that background of, oh, we are doing the NCL, we have that relationship with our municipal employees, they're able to advocate and they were able to influence the planning of their municipality to not have, or to discourage urban sprawl, which is absolutely amazing. I mean, they really are active on the ground, activists that are super involved. But collecting data for the NCL could also be just, oh, well, I care about public transit. It doesn't need to take a whole lot of time. Mm-hmm. Really, it's what you want to take in it. And if it's just to know a little bit and because you have an interest, like it all starts on something. And what I love is that you don't need to be an expert whatsoever to learn. And it really comes from that perspective of learning and knowing and looking at the data. And it's true, we have a growing number of municipalities, but I want people on the ground in their own localities looking at that number, because me in Montreal saying, oh, well, Toronto has this, they should be doing that. No, I think locally, what's better for your municipality. Every context is different. And that's very, very, very important to highlight. We want to celebrate municipalities that are doing well in their context. I really don't want people to think that, oh, well, it's the NCL. Yes, Vancouver is going to win a lot, because by definition, maybe they have the way the city was planned, they have a little more that are like this, but most of Canada is not made of huge municipalities. I think it's a majority of maybe like middle-sized cities. And if we all want to do better in Canada, well, that means the thousands of smaller size or middle-sized municipality need to do better. It's not just the bigger ones. And therefore all citizens have that power. And I see a lot of, generations and different sources of interest and students and people that are retired. And I'm really impressed with what everybody has to offer. And that project is terrific because of all the people that made it.
Right. So I'll just tell you, as you know, I had a cold last week, a non-COVID cold. For quite a few days, I hadn't talked to any humans, and I really hadn't even read anything. That was how much of a cold I'd had. I was just watching like junk TV. And I did feel like I need to read this report before I meet up with you and have the show. And and so it's something where I was like, okay, I got to read a report. But as soon as I pulled it up and looked at it, I remembered from the last time how much I got out of it the last time. And it really, it was something where, once I got to the first section, I almost felt compelled to go right through it regardless. And I would have anyways. And the reason why I say that, and I want our viewers to know, both on Zoom and on Facebook Live and wherever fine videos like this are shown, for each little section, like say we're talking about urban greenness or sustainable buildings, they tell you which city in Canada is the winner that year. And it tells you some details about why that city is the winner. And then the other thing it does is it talks about international winners of that, or examples of that. And I found that fascinating. So for example, for urban greenness, which Calgary is currently in the last place for, but we'll talk about Calgary in a minute. But there was Frankfurt, Germany, and it was really fascinating. And so what I was curious about is, when you were pulling all this stuff together, what were some of the examples from these cities that you were like, oh, this is the coolest thing?
Oh, that's a good question. I think the affordable housing one was very interesting. So affordable housing, we highlighted Berlin because Berlin had, they had a really big housing crisis, right? The price of rent has been skyrocketing for the last 10 years. And what the city of Berlin has done is they decided that, well, we don't want companies basically to run to manage all the housing in the city, and we need place to have affordable housing. So what can we do? And it was actually a project, and that's why I love it, because it was a project that started with citizens. It was citizens that decided to start a campaign to say, rent prices are really going high. What can we do? We have all those companies that are only thinking about doing profit, and it should be the municipality that kind of regulates that. And the way that they did it is they decided to have take back some of the housing that was under company's name. So if a company had, I think, certain so certain amount of buildings, I forget, or a certain amount of money. But if a company had more than that, then the city would take possession of a percentage, and that way it would put together a pool of affordable housing that would be the city's property, meaning that the city would decide the rent, and the idea is that the rent would be cheaper than what is currently available. And that's amazing, because it's a city that has grown so much and has really taken action, started by citizens. That started 10 years ago. It takes that long to do a campaign. Unfortunately, like, we can't just snap our fingers and it happens. No, it took citizens 10 years to have that project go, and maybe even more, actually. But in the end, they did it. And now it's going to be housing that will be managed by the city and be given to people that are more in need or in certain situations. So I was really blown away by that project.
Yeah, it's so I'm actually just going to reiterate for folks watching the show. First of all, the link to the National Climate League report is in the chat, and it will show up after whatever social network place you see this video. But it is really cool to see what our other cities in Canada are doing for each of these big, thorny issues that we're trying to figure out. Well, here's what Winnipeg's doing, or here's what St. John's is doing, and then to see places from around the world that are tackling these solutions in different ways. I really think anybody that opens it up, that cares about climate, will do what I did. You can't help but just go right through the thing, because it's really fascinating information. So I give kudos to the incredible work you've done. I know that you mentioned that the the league has evolved this year, and I guess it becomes kind of a living document, right? As we go forward, we're going to keep adding things that become more relevant. You mentioned the amount of municipal employees working on climate is one of them. I think racial justice is another one. Is that?
We have the gender equity.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep, that's one of the new one. That's really interesting. It was a study that we found was done by a journalist, actually, and they looked at data on the salary of different genders. So for the purpose of the study, unfortunately, there's a gap of information on non-binary. The way that the data is formulated is male and female.
Right.
We would
It's
love
behind
to
the
have
times still.
accurate.
That's we got to catch up.
Exactly. There's that, but that means there's still work to do, and that's great.
Right.
You know, we that's exactly what we want to work forward to. Looking forward to the future editions, and being more inclusive would be super interesting. But anyway, that report looked at the pay gap between female and male working in the municipal level.
So, do you have a sense of other, what future league standing reports may have that it doesn't have currently?
We have a big interest in a few topics, one of them being water, because it's a very important resource. We just haven't found the right indicator to approach it. Whether it's amount of water or how a city manages its water usage, because it's a very important resource. Water quality, that is an issue, especially in some parts of Canada. So that would be one.
Okay.
And then the second one is, mentioned it a little bit, but urban sprawl is something that we're definitely really keen on looking up, because it's a huge topic. I mean, I was looking at data and the amount of population since the pandemic that have been moving away from bigger cities to go to smaller ones to have increased quality of life, and you can work from anywhere. So maybe you're moving and you decided that your quality of life when we're stuck at home and no access to nature was not good. So all that population is migrating toward the smaller-ish, not small, but just the area around. That's creating a huge influx of population. And then cities have to realize and say, oh, we're getting a huge influx of population. How do we deal with it? And one of the solutions sometimes is urban sprawl. And that means getting rid of agricultural land or getting rid of green forests to build houses. And yes, it's not one of the more sustainable choices, unfortunately, that you can make for lots of reasons.
So regarding water, I'm going to reach out to one of my big brains here in Calgary, a fella by the name of Bernie Amell, who I'll ask him about what kind of metrics we can pull together on that, and he'll have something to say. Shout out to Bernie Amell. But so when I was thinking about the evolution of this, I was thinking about my fair city of Calgary, and the data that we pulled in. When you look back at 2021, we just got a new city council in October, and that city council hit the ground running with a net zero 2050 proclamation and climate emergency call. And so when I was thinking about how this thing might evolve, I was thinking that maybe next year has a most improved player, because and if next year does have a most improved player, I'm going to challenge my city and my fellow Calgarians and say that we want this thing. We can't be the best overall right away, but we can go after the most improved if we want, or we can give it a shot, and I'll do it with you if you'll join me. So any chance we can get a most improved player part in that? I mean, not Calgary. I'm not trying to buy our way into an award just yet, but might that be a future piece of the National Climate League?
I think it's definitely in the spirit of the league. The spirit of the league is to highlight what cities are doing to advance further, and to not at all to point fingers of, oh, you're doing terribly. It's really far from the spirit. It's really to get inspired and be positive in wanting to do better. So I will definitely look into it, Steve.
Excellent.
I like the idea.
All right. You heard me, Calgary. Let's do this. Why not? If we've got the right city council in place, we can do it. So you know what? We're going to bring a panelist on who's a perfect person to chat with in this regard. But before we do, I just want to mention some of the sponsors that help us keep the lights on here. We've got a few new ones and a few ones that have been around for a little while, and it's so critical to be able to funding is such a hard thing to do, especially here in Calgary, I'll say, and we've got some really great partners here. So to begin with, I'll talk about Skyfire Energy. They're Western Canada's trusted solar provider since 2001. So think about that. That's over 20 years here in Western Canada, where everybody else is thinking about oil and gas. And they started a solar company, and it's taken off. They started with a vision to bring the magic of solar power to the world for a stronger, healthier, and more sustainable global community. Our next sponsor is Solar Homes Incorporated. It's your net zero home renovations experts right here in Calgary, Alberta. Invest in your future, lower your emissions, renovate with return. Their website link is in the chat, and you can book a consultation today. Radicle Balance is a new sponsor for us as well. They ask you, are you ready to bring planet positive solutions to your business? Financial and environmental sustainability is possible, and Radicle Balance is going to prove it to you. And our final sponsor I'll mention tonight is Go Electric, the exclusive provider of used electric cars and plug-in hybrid vehicles for Calgary and beyond. I really feel like Go Electric is in the perfect spot here right now in Calgary because we're still waiting for new electric car prices to come down. But maybe you're at the end of the life cycle of your vehicle and you really want to get into the electric cars. Then why not go and check out a used electric car down at Go Electric? I can tell you, we had a Climate Hub board member go and take one for a test drive. She loved it. She's now driving. She went electric, I guess you'd say. That's what happened there. So go down and go and check out Go Electric and tell them the Hub sent you. Beyond that, we'll move along with the show here. So we're excited to have join us on tonight's show Alex Lidstone, who is the Alberta organizer of Climate Caucus, a nationwide organization that's created a nonpartisan network of over 460 local elected leaders driving system change to transform communities in 10 years. In fact, their mantra is something I really like, and I think you will too. One world, 10 years, no one left behind. How can you disagree with that? Alex Lidstone, do we have you on the board here?
Yeah, hello. Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
You betcha. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty well. I'm excited for this conversation, and I'm really excited about the National Climate League standings. I've been following along with all of the webinars and talks, and Margot's been coming to a few of our calls, and I think she's coming to one of our electeds only calls next week. So yeah, it's a really great initiative. So I'm happy to be here talking about it.
Can you maybe you can just give us a brief, brief description of, I sort of gave it an airy description, but maybe a brief description of what Climate Caucus does?
Yep. So we're a national network of, actually, we're just about 500 local government elected officials now. And they're all working towards, climate, like saving the climate, as well as biodiversity and social justice. So that's where the No One Left Behind comes. And that's something that we really added in after sort of our first year of existing. We kind of realized that if you're just focusing on climate, you're not really solving any of the problems. You're kind of digging a deeper hole. So so that's usually what all of our policy and things tries to focus on. And then we exist primarily to support locally elected officials. So a lot of people get confused that we go to council and do delegations and things like that, but we actually just try and focus all of our work on what the elected officials need to be able to do awesome things in their local governments. So we provide networking opportunities, lots of resources. We have like a counselor's handbook that we've been working on for a really long time, which is also sort of a living document. And then we do advocacy to other levels of government, like on behalf of the local governments.
So I know that Climate Caucus and Climate Reality Canada, but specifically the National Climate League, that there's, you guys have already begun sort of synergizing on that front. What's that synergy look like?
Well, we actually have an MOU with Climate Reality Project Canada, which is great because a lot of what we provide for counselors is sort of more about resources and networking with each other. But something that's really important about local government and actually being able to get things through is sort of the trifecta of, counselor champion, staff champion, and people on the ground. And people on the ground don't realize how important their role is in driving the change in local governments. So I think Climate Reality Project and the Climate Hubs do a really good job of bringing people together and making those connections with counselors in a meaningful way. So that's sort of what the goal is with the relationship here, is to make sure that we bring counselors so that they're going to their climate hubs and they're actively making those connections and understanding how important that relationship is. And then the climate hubs sort of do the same thing for us. So if they have counselors or things that are joining, then they can let us know and be like, oh, hey, you can join Climate Caucus, and they have resources and things like that.
That's excellent. Margot, is there anything you want to say on that?
No, I absolutely agree with Alex. I think the whole relationship building and really building a network is how we move forward, because there are so many great initiatives. To go back to my point of locally, people know what works for them. Like, I can't say that the National Climate League is going to come to a perfect solution, but I know that connecting a counselor in BC and connecting a hub in Ontario, or even within the province, comparing, like connecting similar municipalities, that's how we're going to make progress. And so just reinforcing Alex's point.
So I'll let you in on a little secret about how I do these shows. And I start out by trying to figure out what is the aboutness. So what is the big thing about this? And I focused in on measure what matters. And then I try to think about, well, okay, what's the big question here? And so this is my big question. Can the national, well, actually, I'll pan back for a second and just say that, I covered the COP26 conference. I did daily broadcasts. And, there was a lot of, it was a very hope versus cynicism dichotomy. Every day you're immersed in that. And it was all centered around, okay, what are these politicians going to say they're going to do? And will it be enough? And then we've got to try and make sure that they actually do what they say they're going to do. And I feel like since COP26, there's a lot of good promises on there. We're still not far enough, and we're not fast enough. But I feel like the key thing on the planet for climate activists, no matter where you are in the world, is how are we going to hold these politicians to what needs to get done and push them even further to what we know needs to be done. So not just what they can safely say, because that'll get them reelected and that won't get them in trouble with their business friends or any of that stuff. And I guess my question to both of you is it possible that the National Climate League is the tool that we can use to confront that particular challenge, that what I think is one of the most important challenges right now on the planet?
Do you want me to jump in? I have some thoughts.
Sure.
So one thing that I always find about local governments and climate action in particular, but is that they never want to lead. So, a lot of the counselors who are really pushing, because you will find across the country that all local governments, they have like a full council and a mayor. And so some of them are going to be a little more progressive. Some of them are going to be climate deniers, most of them are probably going to be kind of on the fence and playing politics. So the ones who are a little bit more progressive, it's helpful for them to know what's going on in other places so they can say, hey, look, like we're not leading on this. We're actually going to be behind on this if we're not doing it. And everyone else is already sort of on board, because that brings the people who are kind of on the fence. Then they say, oh, well, maybe we should actually be doing this, and it's less scary. And that's the same with staff. Like when they bring it to their staff, they're also tend to be quite conservative in terms of what they're willing to do and sort of push on. But if they know that it's happening somewhere else, and they can basically cut and paste the work that was done in another place into their own community, if it works, and already also if they can connect with that community and understand, okay, what were the barriers, what were the challenges, what do you wish you did differently, then it makes it a lot easier to sort of replicate in other places, and then they don't really feel like they're upsetting the business community or upsetting the people on the ground. They're just sort of like, this is the direction that the country is going. So the National Climate League does a really good job of highlighting, where it's already happening and what's going really well in certain places. So it's easier now to go and look at what's happening, like in Calgary or in other cities that might be leading in certain areas, and then having the sort of more progressive councillors, they can try and copy that.
Yeah.
Yes,
How about you, Margot?
If I can complement on that, I think it's really about case study and like not necessarily reinventing the wheel, but looking at what works and how to implement it in your community. I think that you've talked about COP, and there's been a huge focus in the last few years on like thinking global but acting local. Or even I was listening to a talk from Jane Goodwill a few weeks back, and she was saying, don't think global, because global is scary right now.
Right.
So think local and act local. And it's about putting together those network and seeing what locally you can do. And so having those case studies and really not trying to reinvent the wheel. Look at what other communities have done. I mean, there are so many bridges, and there's so many communities that are globally trying to change things. Like C40 does really amazing work, because all those mayors, and I think we had a panel actually in the climate dialogue parallel to COP. Some Quebec actors put together dialogues between municipalities, and we had some elected officials that said, we want to be leaders because we want to protect our community. And I guess, Alex, like not everybody is like that, but some are, and hopefully we can elect more of those and really show the way, and not have it as a scary way, or not have it as the Climate League used to have a sports theme. And one of the reasons for that is, well, we're all winning at the end of the day if we address that problem. And I think there's that kind of as base to put together that, we all will beneficiate from going in the right direction, is what we're trying to do.
Yeah. I think it really, really helps, for those people in the middle that Alex was talking about there. I think it really helps to be able to say, well, look, this is what Montreal's doing. I'm not proposing anything, out of that's crazy here. This is, it's happening there. Take a look at it. Let's do it. So I think that's the meat of what this, these standings are about, and I think it's really, really valuable. So I guess that sort of segues into, we do have a new city council here in Calgary. Well, actually, across Alberta, we have new city councils, and we're starting to develop our relationships here in Calgary with them, and in other cities across Alberta. What's the best way for us to make sure that this is top of mind with those new councillors and new mayors?
I think it already is. I think I'm very hopeful that we've reached that point where it is one of the main thing that people talk about. We've shared that study of half of Canadians really are concerned about what is going to happen, how their lives are going to be impacted. So it's about framing it and finding solutions, and that's how we think about the indicators. And that's why I always explain how they were picked. I mean, there are so many things that you could that you could measure as the sustainability of a city with. There's so many, But at the end of the day, you try to find like the low hanging fruits of, well,
Mhm.
what are some ways that you can implement change at the municipal level? And one of the one that is a bit difficult for us has been like the energy indicator. It's been really difficult because you look across Canada and it's all over the place, and the accessibility of the data is not that easy. And
Mhm.
municipalities action that they can take to influence that, even if it's a huge part of their emission, they don't necessarily have that much control. Or what they could do is have solar panels, and that's hard. It is something that people advocate for, and the Federation of Canadian Municipalities has a guide on how to do that. But I think it's there, and I think that what the National Climate League is trying to do is to give positive and positive solutions, basically.
Mhm. So I guess, when I think about, I mean, Margot, you may not be aware of it, being from Montreal, but Alex certainly would be. There's some kind of crazy fraternal competition that goes on between Calgary and Edmonton. I think it's around the hockey. I gather people care about those things, and it does create this competition. And I indulge in some Edmonton jokes. It's easy to do, but I often think about how can we find a way to trigger that competition in a way that benefits us on these climate indicators. And so I'll turn that over to you two. Maybe Alex has got some ideas, but how can we harness this natural city versus city friendly camaraderie, and turn it into some climate wins using the National Climate League, I guess I'd say.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because I will call out the Calgary Climate Hub right now. A few people from there when we talk about different things about Calgary, they say, well, do you know what's going on in Edmonton? Like, can you find out what they're doing in Edmonton? Like, how many staff do they have?
Right.
And then, because they want to sort of bring it forward in there. I know the city of Calgary right now, or the Calgary Climate Hub, is working on some one-pagers of what they're looking for from the new council. And they did refer to some stuff that's happening in Edmonton, because it's a really good example, because they're also in Alberta. They have a similar sort of provincial political thing going on, and I'm not gonna lie, they're a little ahead on certain things. They've been.
Oh yeah, they're running laps around us for sure. There's no question.
So it's I think it's good to sort of highlight that in meetings and things, that when you're, it's really important to have the sort of reciprocal relationship, but when in your asks, it's important to say, well, they're already doing this, and then maybe try and push forward on some other things. And then it also maybe encourage them to like talk to each other, the councillors, the like local governments in each of them. There's definitely things that Calgary can learn from Edmonton, and that Edmonton can learn from Calgary, probably. But
yeah, I was in on a chat with the Edmonton Climate Hub, and there was stuff that they were like, you guys have this, and we should be, and I was just like, oh, we actually have climate stuff that you don't already have. And so there's definitely some opportunity for action on both sides here. Margot, you got any thoughts on that?
I'm just learning everything on that. I want to capitalize on it. I'm thinking next year, I'm like, how can I move those players and put them strategically? I think it's great to have great lessons learned, and once again, just not reinventing the wheel, but doing better. Yes.
Yeah. So I should mention this, this is the perfect time. I can do this smooth segue, like I actually know what I'm doing, and mention that we have the Edmonton Climate Hub is leading this, and we're giving a hand in some capacity, coming up on April 6th, 2022 at 7 p.m. The RSVP link is in the chat. We have the Edmonton and Calgary Mayors Summit on climate change. So obviously this is right in the wheelhouse of what we're talking about today. As it relates to the National Climate League, or anything that's in there, what are there any questions you'd like to see if because I could at least try to see if I can get one of the questions asked. Does anybody have anything in mind? I mean, I'm going to end up doing a scratch pad on it anyways and seeing what they'll take. But what if you let's put it this way, if you had Edmonton and Calgary's mayors in front of you right now, what might you be interested in asking them?
Well, it's kind of a tricky one, but something that always comes to mind for me is about how big city mayors can work together to influence like funding, particularly for local climate action. You know, it's really tricky. Like any sort of advocacy in Alberta is probably going to fall on deaf ears right now, but you know, there's always opportunities to advocate to the federal government for funding for these things. And I know, you know, Calgary's climate plan is probably going to be really contingent on federal funding. I know Edmonton's is, like a lot of the big moves that they're trying to do, they need funding for. So something that I would like to know probably is how can they work together to, you know, bring more funding into like larger cities for their climate plans. You know, both cities have Liberal MPs, I think, and like in there within, you know, ridings there, and you know, so he is connected to the Liberals as well. So, and Mayor Gondek is just amazing. Shout out to her. But so yeah, it would be nice to know if there's ways they can work together on that, and even potentially bring in other big mayors from across the country.
Great question. Margot?
I think mine would be just more my personal interest, and it's one of the secondary indicator in the National Climate League, and I don't think it gets enough love, so I'm going to give it some love.
Give it some love.
It's about divestment and what are divestment plans for money. You know, where does the money go? How do we do better with that? And so stopping to fund fossil fuel is one of the big ways. So I don't actually know much about Calgary and what it has right now, but having a plan for divestment is something that is in the talks in some municipalities. Really looking forward to see how that's going to play out more and more in the upcoming year.
Excellent. Well, you know, I'm going to head into the wrap-up section of the show, but before I do, I just want to make sure that I give both of you a chance to say anything that maybe you'd like to communicate to our readers. What am I writing a book? Our viewers. So, you know, if there's anything that you feel like you didn't get asked about that you want to communicate, whatever it is, this is your shot. Go for it. I'll let Margot go first.
Okay, well, I really want the National Climate League to be used and be read, and I know it can be a little intimidating, but I think, Steve, you put it really well. You want to read through it right away, and it's a learning tool and it's advocacy tool. So use it, read it, share it as much as you want. And if you are interested in one of the indicators, we are looking for volunteers actually. So depending on the time commitment that you have, we are flexible, and I'm happy to put my email in the chat for anyone that wants to participate. And I'll take also the time to really thank all my team at the Climate Reality Project. Thank you, Steve, for inviting me today. And thank you, Alex, for sharing that conversation with us.
I just want, before I go over to Alex, I just want to mention in the chat, our new executive director, Angela Mcintyre, is watching right now. And it's a big step for the Calgary Climate Hub that we have an executive director. I'm over the moon that we now have somebody in that position. And her first contribution to the climate change chat is to say that we should have a climate cup. You know, like the trophy. And that's a heck of an idea, Angela. We'll talk about it. Let's figure out what that is. Maybe it's made out of upcycled ocean plastic, or, you know, it's got a solar panel on top that charges your phone. I don't know, whatever, but I'm down. Alex, what any closing thoughts for us?
Yeah, I think, you know, one thing that I do really want to highlight about the National Climate League is really, first of all, the collecting of the data is really important. And it's something that a lot of local governments, especially like medium or small size ones, as Margot mentioned, are the majority of Canadian municipalities, and they have really lacking capacity. So it's really helpful for the community to get involved and help them actually collect that data so they can have an understanding of where they are now and where they need to move forward or where they may be struggling. And the other thing is, especially in these communities that don't have capacity to be really pushing on climate, they may not have climate staff or anything, the help from the community is so, so important. And a lot of councillors who have been able to do a lot of really good work in their small or medium-sized communities, it's because they have such a good relationship with people on the ground, and they sort of say, oh, hey, you want to do this? Okay, like you can go do it yourself, like you can go do the research. And I think that the National Climate League is a really great almost gateway to how you can effectively help your council and how you can build that relationship. And then going from there, you can like think of all of the things that you can do once you have that data and you have that trusted relationship with the council and staff. So yeah, really great job, Margot. And it's really, I'm happy to be in this conversation, and yeah, I hope that you can keep pushing it forward and have even more communities join next year.
Oh, we're going to push. We're going to push. Thank you, both of you, so much for coming on today. This is exactly the conversation that I wanted to have. Margot, I'll thank you again for I know it must have been an enormous amount of work to pull all of that together and to make the very readable and enjoyable document that I dug into the other day. And so thanks for the great and important work. And you tell everybody at Climate Reality Canada, we do important work on that. Okay, that's all for now. I'll just mention the upcoming hub events. I'll reiterate 2022 Edmonton and Calgary Mayor's Summit on Climate Change. It's April 6th, 2022, at 7 p.m. And the RSVP is in the chat. Our next Climate of Change features water protector Latasha Calfrobe, and we're going to have her on April 25th at 8:05 p.m. She's actually our keynote speaker for our AGM, but we'll have a separate event just so that you can tune in and listen to the wisdom of Latasha Calfrobe. Let's see. I know there are other things, but there's too many things, so I'm not going to do all of them. I'm just going to leave those to tantalize you with. And then I'll just say that, a quick pitch for the Calgary Climate Hub. As I always say, the antidote for despair is action. If climate is something that can affect you, or the world is too much, and let's face it, in 2022, the world is too much. Find yourself something like a Calgary Climate Hub and plug into it and meet up with other people that are smart and care about the right things. I can tell you, I mentioned earlier that I was sick for a few days last week, non-COVID. I don't know why I feel compelled to tell you that, but non-COVID anyways. I hadn't humaned in a while, and I plugged in with some of the Calgary Climate Hub folks for a meeting. And I just felt like it was just this warm, smart, doing important things place to be. And so certainly if you feel anxiety about the future and climate is this big, unwieldy, scary thing in a whole field of unwieldy, scary things, you need a Calgary Climate Hub in your life. So consider joining there. And if there's another, if you're in another city, then find yourself a hub. And if there ain't a hub there, start one. Climate Reality Canada is how you do it. So we're going to leave it at that. I do want to thank my incredible producer, Vivian Elzinga, for helping us get this thing running here again today. And that's all for now. Good night for now, and let's get to work.